Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining today. Truly appreciate you guys taking the time to join this webinar that Indovance has put on for everybody. The topic is basically the civil industry and post-pandemic recovery in 2021 and what that will look like. I want to introduce, before we introduce the panelists here talking today, I did want to thank Indovance for being such a good partner to us. You guys have been invaluable with what you do every day on a day-to-day basis for us, and I know for the companies that are here represented on the phone call. So we do thank you, and we do thank Mr. Joshi, the president, CEO, and owner of the company as well. So, guys, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be distributed to everyone afterwards for their own perusal to go over any of the questions that the panelists here today answer, and so that we all have a good understanding of what they're saying and how it might help you moving on into the future. So just to give you a brief and to go further along the topic of the webinar, this is about the post-pandemic recovery as it relates to the civil industry. We all know that COVID-19 has had a tremendous effect on supply, demand, and other industry dynamics within each of our respective business verticals, particularly with the civil industry, construction industry, renovation industry. Beyond the short-term impact of an economic downturn, the crisis has also been expected to hit long-term supply and demand, which has basically left a lasting impression on how investment is made and how economic uncertainty might persist. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, as we know, and we do think there are some good insights that this panel can help bring along to everyone here listening today. So just to kind of give everyone an overview, we're all used to cyclical downturns, but the speed and strength which COVID-19 had struck everyone across the world was unprecedented. Projects were delayed and canceled. Supply chains came under threat immediately. Employee and subcontractor concerns became immediate priorities, including employee and subcontractor health, social distancing, practical concerns and challenges around how that operates within our respective verticals took a hit. Companies had to furlough workers to find future stability. And then now companies are having to go along the lines of looking for future availability of the skills that have been absent. And because many construction and contracting companies operate without substantial capital reserves, the impact of the lockdown has been significant. And it's forced a lot of companies to restructure debt and to seek new sources of capital. And it's forced our industry and this industry to look at new ways of doing things, all the way from using new and emerging technology for remote collaboration, all the way to how we conduct ourselves on work sites, so on and so forth, and how we work with people and partners and cities and governments and municipalities. So we're managing the immediate crisis. We're trying to stabilize the supply chain across the board. Everyone's trying to reinforce their company's financial position, and we're looking ahead to the possibilities. So at this point, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. We have Mr. Sami Aslam, Director of Civil Engineering, Borrego Solar Systems, based out of New England, regional headquarters in Lowell, Massachusetts. Sami has 20 years of engineering leadership experience working in different engineering businesses of large multinational corporations. He has led a global engineering teams and project requisition and engineering programs, project management, new project development, and NPI. He is a graduate of the California State University at Fresno, and and the rest of our Polynet Institute in Troy, New York. He's a licensed professional engineer in New York and Massachusetts, and he is one of our panelists here today. We also have Mr. Jerry Perales, president of Perales Engineering out of Austin, Texas. Jerry has over 20 years of civil engineering experience and land development experience, with his expertise being in drainage and water quality design, which includes understanding of the science of hydrology and hydraulics and the ability to design spreadsheets rather than by the use of black box programs, a level of expertise respected by city staff, so on and so forth. His years in the industry has equipped him with the ability to provide creative solutions for complex project issues. And Jerry was the division lead for a commercial land development group as well. Jerry did develop GSI-based software for hydraulic analysis of surface water runoff for the Corps of Engineers and ESRI. And he is focusing on developing the digital floodplain mapping for FEMA, using and modifying GIS-based digital terrain mapping software, including ARC-based HEC, GeoRAS hydraulic modeling systems as well. So Jerry, thank you for being here as well. And we also have Trevor Langtree, president of Langtree Land Surveying out of Seattle. He started in the AEC industry back in 1993, and he's got a wide range of comprehensive experience in a land surveying profession with 14 years at or above a project management role, with 8 years as president of Langtree Land Surveying, where he has the opportunity to employ great employees and even grow throughout the current situation. And Trevor, thank you for being here as well. Lastly, we have Chris Krebs, CEO of Novus Building Services, based out of Washington, D.C. and West Palm Beach, Florida. Chris has owned and operated Novus Building Services for a good 12 years now. He started in his garage and has grown this company to be the leading multi-family fabricator and installer of granite, stone, and quartz, all the way to full scope renovations from Boston to Miami. And Novus has really grown its footprint based out of the Washington, D.C. Metro area, and has pushed all the way down to the Florida area, servicing the markets from Florida to all the way to North Carolina, out of the Southeast shop. Chris, thank you for being here today as well. So guys, we're going to get started. Looking forward to having this. I think this time will be a lot smoother. Guys, I'm going to kind of go over some questions, and feel free at any time. This is pretty low key, I guess you could say. Feel free anytime to jump in and answer any questions as well. So the first question I have is actually for Chris. Chris, in your opinion, what is your expectation of market, of any kind of market return to quote unquote normal within, let's just say, the renovation fabrication industry?
I appreciate the opportunity from Indovance, and honored to be on the panel, guys. Thank you very much. We're seeing kind of a mixed bag based on investment strategy and development strategy, not only from third-party management companies, but also from high net worth individuals and then institutional investors. But some of our interestingly, our largest clients haven't really kicked back off from the original slowdown from COVID and what I would say would be the end of March of 2020. Some of the smaller investors and third-party management companies have moved forward during the COVID pandemic and continue to ramp up. We're just now seeing our larger clients start to dip what I would call their big foot back into the market as far as renovations. And I suspect there's a anticipation, well, two things. One, of a financial markets are anticipating a secondary stimulus. With or without that, I think there's going to be a lot of foreclosures owned properties, but then also on rental properties of evictions, which will provide an opportunity. We do multifamily residential turnovers for apartment complexes, almost no retail. So from that perspective, we're seeing it just to start ramping back up. I suspect at the end of first quarter 2021, we'll get some kind of standard equilibrium to go back. But I think it's in our market, it'll be toward the end of 2021 when we're back at a standard operating within what we call equilibrium, uh, as far as a profitable revenue streams across the board.
Yeah,
Retail.
Chris, thank you.
Go ahead.
No, keep going, Chris, please. No, please.
Retail has, fortunately, in this business and renovation and remodeling, retail has spiked and is at an all-time high, and it's kind of been feast or famine. We dropped to 37% production. We're back up to somewhere around 50%, but we have an assembly line with a production process where we actually cut the stone, fabricate it, and then go install it along with the full scope. I'm good.
Well, thank you, Chris. And Chris, just while we have your attention right now, as far as any financial practices which has altered Novus's operations, from supply chain all the way to let's just say how we deal with vendors, how do you expect that to change in 2021 and moving forward? Do you expect any of this past year to have a lasting effect on how people move forward? Will people be a little bit more guarded, or do you think the supply chain will actually beef up a little bit?
Supply chain has been more flexible with Novus in particular. Debt structures have changed. We've renegotiated our entire debt structure to accommodate the lack of production, of profitable production. And cost of goods sold, we're profitable, but then again on the expense line, Novus in particular during COVID has started losing money. So it's a fine line of communicating with supply chain, with our finance companies, with the banks, and then I think they'll get less lenient somewhere toward end of second quarter of 2021. But right now, everybody's willing to play ball as long as we have open communications.
Got it. And Chris, is there any good advice you have for the people listening today with your experience as owner, CEO of the company?
I would say, personally, the mid and long-term strategies had to change for me and for Novus, and keeping cash reserves suddenly became an issue. And as we expanded and grew, that intersection of time, money, finance, profitability, it can creep up quick. Keep cash reserves and get to know your bank or your equity partners real well.
Sure, and that's great advice, Chris. And I do think that that will resonate very well with people. Couldn't agree with you more. Appreciate your insight, Chris. Well, Chris, we're going to come back to you as well more in the next 45 minutes. And then Sami, I'd also like to pose that question to you. With your experience, Sami, what is your expectation of the market returning to quote unquote normal within your specific industry? Do you have any insight that you'd like to share with the group on that particular question before we move on?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. It's going to be interesting, right? I mean, from what we have seen, especially in the renewables, and as you can see, Borrego Solar, I mean, we have been very focused in certain states, for example, Massachusetts, New York, California, Illinois. We're now getting into Maine. And these are the states where the local governments, the state governments are actively have renewable energy standards that they want to be. For example, New York wants to be, their 70% of their electricity to come from renewable sources by 2030. So that is the positive that we have going, that is the market for us, right? So call it the wind in our sails. And from what we have seen and what we do is, for Borrego, we develop projects to detail design, to construction, to operate and maintain. And to date, what we have seen is that we have been able to maintain our momentum on the development side. We did see a couple of months of hiccups on the construction side, especially in New York, where some of the construction was deemed non-essential, but we were able to recover there. And our customers to date, people, after we develop the projects, companies, they end up owning our projects. Their outlook has been positive. So, in summary, I would say that, and especially with the new government coming in at the federal level, we think is going to be a positive environment for us. We did have some, I would call them smaller setbacks, but we were able to recover from those. So we are looking for the markets to grow, and certainly we are planning for growth at this point.
Sure. So solar development, commercially and community scale solar development, you guys seem to be in a really good position moving forward, knowing that the pandemic, you guys took a little bit of a hit with being deemed non-essential, but now recovered from that. And then your renewable portfolio for the next 30 years, particularly in energy storage, the incentive for development on that is going to grow, correct?
That's right. I mean, energy storage is going to be pretty exciting growth industry for it. If you think about it, right, solar produces electricity during certain times of the day. And those are the times when folks, in normal times are in offices or not at home, and the demand is low. And if you can harness that energy, store it, and then you can release it later times of the day when the demand is higher, that is really exciting. And that can actually displace fossil fuel-based peaking units, what they call it, in different parts of the world. So that could be pretty interesting. And so that's going to be go ahead.
No, that's a great insight, and I don't mean to interrupt you. I actually want you to expand upon that. With your experiences and the challenges faced during the pandemic, you see this as something that is going to have a lasting effect with regards to the way you guys operate and the way the world operates, correct?
That's right. I mean, I don't know if you were looking at the news during the summer. California had some really hot summer days, and there were days in which they were actually had to curtail power. With energy storage in the play, the situation would have been different. They were, those were shorter periods of peak demand, and that could have been supported by or resolved by having energy storage. So that's something that we are getting into, and I think we will continue to develop energy storage in California, New York, Massachusetts, in addition to solar.
Got it. Okay. Sammy, thank you. That's a good insight. And Jerry, I'd like to ask you the same question, sir, as well. When do you think? What's your expectation of the market returning to "quote unquote" normal within your industry?
Thank you, Garrett, for the introduction and for the question. I was just thinking about Sammy's remark about learning to store our energy. I mean, we've been storing our water for so long for just those type of emergencies where all of a sudden we have a drought, but yet we have a lake. So, and now we're coming up with resources that are able to contain, battery solutions that are able to store this stuff that's now, in the generation that it is now that's actually feasible. It is amazing and it's super exciting. So well, that's wow for me. As far as my development experience, it's definitely been the same as Sami. I haven't really lost any momentum. The stuff that was deemed non-essential really just kind of lost its use anyway, as far as office, building any offices or any retail. Definitely residential has been picking up even. You know, I've even been told there's free money, anything less than 3% is free money. So there's been a rally even here in Texas. And watching the news about Biden, you know, winning the election and watching, you know, hearing directly from a lot of my investors saying, well, if Trump, you know, doesn't win, I'm not going to be investing or things in like that. But at the end of the day, it seems to me like the pandemic, they're also issuing a vaccine that's 90% from Pfizer working. So the military's out like shooting this stuff out to everywhere because Texas is what, the worst even? El Paso is so bad. I mean, we're almost at 1 million cases here in Texas. So, and you know, our governor wants business as usual. So I haven't really lost any pace. Seeing the new administration and seeing the money the way that it is, I see it more of, you better be aligned with the globe to be able to handle the change and maybe even likely pick up of construction. That's the way I see it.
That's great insight, Jerry. Really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. And guys, we're going to all come back to you. And then Trevor, you were the last one to get this question, and you're going to be the first one to get the next question. Okay.
All
We're
right.
going to go back around in reverse. Okay. So Trevor, I'd like to ask you the same question as well. And what is your expectation with what you're seeing within your industry vertical, not only within your specific industry, but what you're seeing out there in the Northwest?
Well, what I'm seeing is kind of in line with what Jerry and Sammy brought up, that we really had no slowdown. We kept our momentum going. A lot of nationwide home builders and multifamily developers slowed down, but it seemed that it was more about the uncertainty than the actual logic of the economy. But they've started to come back, and also being in my profession of land surveying, it's aging up here in the Northwest. There's not a lot of us, and so a lot of us have taken the time to retire. Not me, I'm sorry, not us. I'm away from retirement. But I feel that 2021 is going to be a great year. And I believe that looking at projections, 2021 US wide will be a growth year. That's projections, though. It's changed in the last 2 months. But I don't see any weakness in the economy as a whole, just variables and mostly uncertainty that really drove it down or paused it. It's kind of like that employee who's the great employee, technical, professional, who has to go home and take care of his mother. He's not changed, but he has something on the side that kind of pulled him away. He's still trying, but the economy's still good, technically, but it just got paused. It's still got the underlying power that when it gets let go, it's going to come back next year.
Yeah, appreciate it, Trevor. I think, when this pandemic ends, I mean, we all know the marketplace will change. National governments will change. Local governments will change. I think there is going to be eagerness to invest in infrastructure to jumpstart the recovery. What that looks like, we don't really know. But I also think that we may face new resource limitations that go along with that. And I think you guys all kind of hinted at that. We also know that public and private portfolios will change. And I think there's definitely going to be an emphasis placed on sustainability and resilience, for sure. And that's something that I know Novus has seen with regards to infrastructure and how people are building, and how people build for inclement weather, so on and so forth. So, I think that's the key words: resilience and sustainability is kind of where I think things are going to start moving towards. But guys, thank you everybody for answering that question. I had to give that question to everybody because I wanted just to hear the diverse opinions here. So as promised, Trevor, you do get the next question, and we're going to go back around in reverse. I am curious to learn how you're considering long-term rent expenses in the wake of the short-term remote working for the better part of 2020, and how you found that productivity rhythm. Is it working in your favor? Is it not? Is there added expenses? And then how do you see that playing out? How has that affected you?
We've got our rhythm. Everybody's doing their part. Since about 2 months into the pandemic, after the phase 1 orders, we've been part in, part out. 2 days in, an employee will come in for 2 days and then work from home. It's been kind of their choice. They've been free to do since 2 months in. But as far as the overhead expense of large office space, I'm in a predicament that may not be the same as a lot of the panel or attendees in that land surveying. I'm kind of half construction crew, like a construction crew, remote, going out and doing field measurements, and then half office. So having a point of, not only storage of equipment, vehicles, etc., I don't see myself downsizing from the office. And I've always been a proponent of remote working. I've never seen a logical reason why not. We have all this technology. However, once you make that the norm, I'm finding that you get questions like, well, who's going to cover the extra power for me being at home? Who's going to cover my broadband expenses? I'm like, you have those anyway, but those are hard to manage versus a centralized office, 1 terabyte per second. Or it's we have fiber cable here and everybody's working efficiently. Gigabyte, sorry. But
yeah, no,
that
makes sense.
That non-logical politics, employee politics, kind of is a hindrance. So I believe I will still. Everybody has a laptop. Everybody has a desktop. You can work remotely, work at the office, but I'm always going to be providing that, especially for the crew contact. They're all over the county, all over the state, and they need a point to call home.
Absolutely. Trevor, that I think the emphasis on remote work and having the ability to leverage cloud technology to support any company initiatives at any level is key. COVID kind of drew a line in the sand with regards to that. And so it's no surprise, but I do agree with you. The companies that definitely pushed on that factor before the pandemic are in a much better position now, and will be in the future for sure. Because I think a lot of companies had to immediately understand how they were going to transition to remote work or working remotely, and definitely found it challenging. And smaller companies tend to fare better because they can typically pivot a lot quicker than legacy companies that have a large footprint and are not used to working remotely. So they definitely have it's like steering a ship, a little bit harder to turn. So thank you, Trevor. Jerry, next question for you, sir. And I'm actually looking forward to asking this question. I'm looking forward to your answer. How do we repurpose our careers? Do you think training people to be in a new industry is that deemed to be safe and necessary? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it segues for me from the conversation that we were just having about rent, because my office where I am is next to a national broadcaster for some podcast. And so now we're homeschooling because the schools are closed, which means that the kids are coming to the office sometimes, which means that now the office people want to buy out my lease. So then that means I could build something here on my property that's an office, and then I could create a school, an office, and hiring the teachers from the school that have been let go. So that's been my next step, is that I've hired a teacher, in fact, and I'm repurposing him, teaching him project management, land development, and the rules of the road for working in my industry, which is completely different from his industry. So again, does this new vaccine mean he's going to be wanting to go back and teach, or does that mean that he likes his new industry? Again, it just seems to me like, well, does anybody really want to go back to working at an office if they don't want to, even if some of this gets solved? So, or is it better now to be able to work from home, or rather than me driving 30 minutes into town to sit in an office,
Sure,
wasting the gas? Sure. I mean, I know the planet loves it that we're at home. That's how I feel about it.
Sure. No, we appreciate that, Jerry.
For some of these cities, like I went to go to a construction site, and the deer completely have taken over the golf course, and I'm happy about that. Let's water the golf course.
Well, Jerry, yeah, that's South Texas for you, though, Jerry. That's great. That's great. Chris, do have a question for you, Chris. What do you think? What are you hearing from your employees, Chris? Do you see themselves? Coming back to the offices in general, not just within your specific industry and vertical, but across the board. Do you see people coming back to the offices, or what's your new vision of the new norm? How do you think that's going to play out?
Okay, I believe we have a heavy on what blue collar employees, light on white collar. Both do a lot, and both are essential. The production guys, I would say, use any means necessary on the blue collar side to leverage any situation as a group, and it's okay. That's the expectation, and we've been dealing with this for 16, 17 years since I've been doing this, and we can't have production, at least in the next decade, until we automate a few more steps, without the production staff. They've come in. We were just talking about this morning. I have not missed a work day, and most of our staff, as you know, Garrett, has not missed a work day. We've come into both fabrication shops every day, even most of the admin staff. So, however, Novus went through a digital transformation 2 years ago, thank goodness, and we've been operating mobily up and down the East Coast for that entire time, and it went from analog, or let's say digital cell phones, to Microsoft Sandbox, Teams, Zoom calls. We've thankfully been doing that for at least a good year prior to COVID hitting, as you know. So our staff is mobile. We except for getting a few checks in the mail, we don't have to be there as an admin staff. Although, Jerry, I agree with you. I like the idea of not having to have an admin staff. And maybe I just come from my particular team environment, athletic on a American football side. You know, growing up and doing that for 16 years and college and seeing it post college, although not being a part of it, but you know, I like the cohesiveness, but I don't think it's essential anymore. Although I like
Yeah,
it.
yeah, and Chris, I do agree with you. Being playing in or highly organized team sports at the collegiate pro level, there is something to be said for having that close knit unity. I do agree with that 100%, and I do agree with everyone else as well that remote work is a new normal. What was that, Jerry?
I said Trevor said it well. It's like having a home base.
Yeah.
And that's what
Yes.
we lack if I do close the office, because it is definitely the home base where everybody can seem to get together and not be on Zoom looking at each other on the screen.
Yeah.
Or they cannot
Yeah.
be. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sami, while we're on this topic of conversation, what are you hearing from your employees? How do you see themselves coming back to the office, or their vision of the new normal? How do you expect to balance that?
Yeah. So, I mean, in our side, right? So there are like three distinct part of our business. On the operate and maintain side, right? So we have that center where people are in a O&M center. They're looking at our customers' solar systems, making sure that if there's something needs to be addressed, they do that. They can do part of that at home. On the construction side, I mean, our sites are like 20, 30, 50 large sites, acres, right? So you can maintain safe distance there. And our safety team has done a remarkable job working with the local authorities to put a protocol in place. So in the design side where I work, it's been different. I don't think what I'm hearing is that the normal we had in February, March of this year is going to return. It's going to be something different. Luckily we had, Google Meet, Ring Central, you name it, Zoom already, but we never used it to the extent that we use now. I mean, we always had issues with feedback, this and that, people not using the tool properly. But it just so happened that once we went into this mode, there was just remarkable resilience on the part of the team that we were able to just come together, pivot, and get into this new norm. And what we have found is that, past 6 months that, some people took the opportunity to some of their office furniture home and they got us set up nicely. But there were some issues, like some people have kids at home, their spouses, significant others work, so they have to work through that spaces. But what I'm hearing from what we're hearing is in the new normal, people want to come back to the office when they have an opportunity to meet with the rest of their team in person. So they don't want to come there, half the team on one day, the other half on the other day. What at least I'm hearing is that, hey, we can get some of the work done at home much more efficiently. We want to come in where we get to see the rest of the team, exchange ideas, answer some questions. So I think that's something that we're looking at how to manage, given, some of the best practices that the local authorities have said this offices can be only occupied to a certain extent. So I think that's something we'll be looking into, but clearly it's going to be different and we'll have to kind of work with that. The other thing that we were doing quite a bit on the development side for our projects, we have to work with local authorities, go to different meetings, mostly at night times to get approvals. And these are public meetings. And many of these meetings on the land development side went remote. And that meant like our team members save roughly like 2 to 3 hours a couple of times a week, not going to a meeting. And that's going to be, a big change for us to start driving back to these meetings. And so we are going to make a big push and try to convince the local planning boards, the conservation commissions, and kind of encourage them to say, hey, maybe there's benefit for all of us, right? To maybe not do 100% of the meetings online, but perhaps 50%. That'll be, good
Sure.
for the planet, good for everyone. So yeah, the new normal is
Sure.
going to be looking different, at least for us.
Sure.
Garrett,
Absolutely. Thank you,
if I
Sam.
could add
Please.
on to
Please,
that
Chris.
too, Sami, in our subcontracting world, I'd say we're now only about a decade behind in the IT step, and arguably we just went through a digitized industrial revolution. But on the new construction side, they're already up to date with these formal remote access meetings, giving access to large files, and not and having to be in 4 or 5 places at once, which you can do when you're using these tools that we have. On the sub side and the renovation side, we've still got a ways to go, but I think it's changed overnight. There is a new normal, and we'll look back historically and check the fact check it in 10 years. There's a new normal coming out.
Yeah. Appreciate it, Chris. That these are all some good key lessons and best practices. And Trevor, you're certainly welcome to elaborate on some of those best practices and key lessons that you see as well, if you don't mind sharing that with the audience real quick. And Trevor, you're on mute right now. It's all good, man.
As you mentioned,
it's happened earlier, Trevor, it's happened to everybody.
As you mentioned earlier, that COVID was a line in the sand. I am always been a tech nerd, so I've always been know what's the latest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But pushing it on other people, that COVID outbreak was, or the COVID outbreak was a line in the sand where everybody had to jump into the technology.
Absolutely.
So, just the best practices, it's allowed me to see what people are capable of, which is a lot more than they think they are during when that line's not drawn. And so when we come out, we'll be able to take the things we've learned, cut back on the requirement to utilize them, but apply them towards efficiency. And I'm also an efficiency.
Trevor, I agree with that 100%. I think this definitely exposed a lot of holes in processes. And I definitely think it allowed companies of all kinds to really see what their employees were capable of doing and doing more, and to become more efficient. I know that I've found that out pretty quickly myself. And then that's been a great, something that I've actually really valued. So I do agree with you. It's, and here's to be really, really nerdy, Trevor. It's kind of like when the first iPhone was released by Apple, an iPad, they eliminated flash technology immediately, and they just drew a line in the sand, and it changed the internet overnight is what happened. And COVID has pretty much done the same thing with every industry on the planet. And I think these industries are no exception. So, Sami, I'm going to start with you for this next question. Project delays. You did kind of mention that with solar development, that you did see, considering that the pandemic deemed solar development non-essential at the time, and you kind of had to play some catch up with regard to project delays, anything like that. How can you elaborate a little bit more on that and how you've overcome that? I think the audience would really love to hear that.
Yeah, just for clarification, so there was on the construction side, that's where, especially in certain regions where, and it was rightly so, right? I mean, we didn't have enough data at that point. Best practices were not developed. So it was deemed construction was stopped, and we had to deal with it. We had hard milestones. As you know, construction is percent complete business, right? So that's where if you haven't completed, you cannot reach your milestone. So that was an issue. But on the development side, where we are actually in the land development for a greenfield solar project, we also encountered some delays in the sense that you have to get approvals for your project at municipal levels. So that's the beauty of it, that you go, if you're proposing a project in a small town, just democracy at work, you're working with the town board, the planning board, the folks who have been delegated to look at wetlands, right? You have to present your projects, you have to work with the neighbors to make sure you're being a good neighbor. And we're talking about parcels of land, 40 to 50 acres. And what happened initially was that all of these public meetings and public venues were closed. So here we had a pipeline of projects to develop, but no meetings we could go to. And we encountered those delays. But luckily, we kept our teams, and our teams were pretty much motivated themselves. We kept on doing the work and working with the local town boards. And luckily, the local governments also helped at the state level. The executive orders that were issued allowed for these in-person meetings to go online. Once that happened, we were able to go back to the towns and say, hey, the governor of Massachusetts or governor of New York, in their executive orders, are allowing you to move these public meetings, which are supposed to be in person, to a different forum. And let's have those. And I think once those meetings started going online, and the funniest thing happened, you had these board members, who are very mature. Some of them may or may not be able to, have used the technology before, but they were able to use it really efficiently. The neighbors, we were still able to send our notices out to project neighbors. They were able to call into Zoom, make their case, and actually make their case much better. And what we found also was screen sharing helped people see the plan sets, the visuals, the support documents much, much better, as opposed to in a dimly lit room where you have an easel and you have a 24 by 36 on a wall. Sure. So it's a good thing and a positive. We were able to make our case, but people were also able to pick point on things and say, hey, maybe you need to improve on this entrance, or they don't like tree clearing, or some wetland needs to be addressed. So yeah, so there were some issues, but I say the technology came to our help, and just the overall resilience of folks, not just us, but everyone around us as a community, really helped and moved forward. So yeah.
That's great, Sami. The 2D representation of how digital works is soon becoming 3D and more virtual. And I think those digital touch points are only going to increase digitizations for sure. Thank you, Sami. Jerry, kind of along the same lines a little bit, how are we going to repurpose our building designs that may have not been needed? I mean, for instance, converting a permitted building, office building, to a residential use. I know you kind of hinted at that earlier. Can you expand a little bit more on what you see?
Well, we have a lot of permitted plans, throughout Austin, and I guess every municipality likely, that are no longer needed, and probably have done a lot of votes to try to get them approved. So now what do we do with them now that we don't need to build them? So that has definitely been tasked to me to figure out, what do we do with some of these storage facilities and some of these offices that have now been permitted and maybe even constructed? So taking even a permitted set of plans and trying to change the land use from, some commercial use that's no longer necessary to some residential use that's more than necessary. And because especially Texas, we're definitely dealing with a housing shortage here in Austin and the central Texas area. So and it has a lot to do with not being able to get through the process of approvals because they're so bureaucratic. So now that we have permitted plans that can't even be built. So that right there is, how can we shorten the process by turning some of these approved projects into residential projects. So one of my first ones is going to be right down the street from where I'm living, and it's going to change a storage unit facility into condominiums. And so we'll be approaching the city in a month once we get the floor plans ready, because then of course we have to change the utility plan, update the, upgrade the utilities for water, wastewater, everything, because it's no longer storage with, an office. So all that stuff has to be re-walked through the city, get reapproved, and then, built. But I mean, 75% of the work's already done. 90% of the approvals are already there. So it means we could, in short order, build some condominiums that would normally take 2 years to build. Will start in 2 months. So
Wow.
Now, how can we let people know that that's actually even an option? Because most of the owners are like, no way, that's not possible. There's no way you can get something approved in 2 months. So that's that's one of the first hurdles, is we'll do one and let them see that. So
Sure. No, that's wonderful. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out, for sure. Interesting. Thank you, Jerry. Trevor, to kind of pivot a little bit on the questions with regards to finance. How should cash flow assumptions be changed to reflect the short-term and long-term impact that the virus has had on the individual property, as well as on the economy on a macro level? What do you think about that?
Well, we discussed, and we're all kind of in agreement. Seattle more, and Austin a little more than sounds like on the East Coast, but the work's there. One cash flow assumption. This is just going to be transparent, but I just wanted to bring it up, is some of us have gotten PPP loans and EIDL loans for our businesses. It's our accounting, forecasting, all of our softwares and systems are not built to take in a large loan that then gets forgiven without it becoming income, which that's what it sounds like the government's going to do for us. So we have to, analyze our financials with that in mind, so that we don't project out with some sort of misleading profit from 2020, as well as right now it was brought up, loans, other loans. If we're able to do some creative, or not creative, but longer forecasting than we usually do as business owners, the price of money right now is, my theory in life is, it's free. Below inflation is free money. 2.65 is 0.4% below regular inflation. And I'm 40 years old. I'll be working until I'm 70. So I got plenty of time to have average inflation be a factor in my decisions. So that's one other thing to think about, is should we take advantage of these loans that are going to be 4% projected in just 2022? They're projecting that the loans are 4% in 2022. That's more than free, So that's getting back to 2018 norms. Yeah, I just got a car on Saturday for the company, our truck, 2.65%. Like, no, I'm not going to pay cash. It's 2.65%. So, that's something that all businesses can take advantage right now of. If they need, you never make expenditures that aren't needed for the purpose of utilization of credit or tax purposes, but it's a good time if you can forecast ahead to be able to get that equipment, those vehicles, that real estate, cut down not cutting down on your office overhead, but own your own building. Going back to question 5, own your own building for 3.2%, then rent it back to yourself. But as far as cash flow assumptions, we've all stated that the projects are on the horizon. So just analyze them with the COVID stimulus and with the how 2020 is actually how your finances actually are, instead of being swayed by a $500,000 PPP loan that's looks on your books to be revenue, because it's not. It's a loan that got forgave, and hopefully my software figures out a way to write that in there by the time I get forgiven for it. But
sure. No, appreciate that insight, Trevor. Thank you. And guys, we have about a couple minutes left here, and we can certainly go a little bit longer than needed. I don't think anyone's going to have any problems with that. Sami, Chris, Trevor, Jerry, I think we've kind of covered the gamut of questions that we think the audience might have the ability to take some insight away from. And I'm going to kind of ask this question to the group, but based on everyone's understanding, and anyone can raise their hand and take this question, but based on your own opinions and research that you have within your own industry, how do you think the election results will affect private clients and their willingness to invest or expand? I'd like to open that question up to the group here, and guys, feel free to jump in and even talk to each other if you need to.
Garrett, if
Chris,
I may,
go ahead, Chris.
I've got a hard
Please.
stop at 2. I've got to get on with some
Please,
developers.
Yep.
Real quick, one thought I did have, an unintended consequences. Our legal bills went down because lawyers, the second they start thinking about an issue or project, they bill. And again, it's pretty normal, but having a medium where we can telecommute in, even within a hearing situation, it has reduced billable hours legally, which
Sure.
I think is great. But my feeling there. But the other thing on multifamily, there's some uneasiness, but there's I don't think it's going to matter either way which administration moves forward, other than maybe possibly a massive distrust in the system for future elections, which could have some unintended consequences. But I think we'll move forward, and our forecast is as good as it's been. I think it's going to go well in the next 2 to 3 years in multifamily, possibly even further out than that.
Well, that's great, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time to join today, Chris. And then whatever questions that come up during your absence, we'll make sure that you get those questions if anyone has any questions for you specifically. But Chris, we do appreciate your optimism as always, for sure. And in fact, I appreciate the group's optimism here. It's actually wonderful here. Chris, I know you have to run. We're going to probably take some questions from the audience here. Thank you for your time, Chris.
Thank you for your time, guys, and I'm honored and well done. Well done, Garrett. Talk to you soon, guys. Bye.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. So I kind of wanted to, if anyone in the audience listening right now has any questions for this group right here, feel free to submit those to the QA panel, and then we can definitely have those questions relayed to this group right here. And if not, we can have our panelists ask questions of each other for a quick minute or two, which would also be great. But right now, I don't see any actual questions. So Jerry, Sami, Trevor, do you guys have anything you'd like to add?
I'm looking forward to this vaccine and seeing what's going to happen next year for sure. I think that, you know, Biden being elected is going to have some effect, but I think that really the vaccine and people's comfort level with Corona has a bigger effect likely next year. That's my prediction anyway.
Sure, sure.
And I was going to be a bit parochial here, and I was going to say, Trevor, we need a lot of help with surveying. So, you know, if you guys are getting bored, you know, come on to this side of the country, and, you know, we got plenty of work here. I also wanted to know, Trevor, I mean, what's your take on drone technology for survey? I mean, is that something that you see coming in?
I
survey?
use it all the time. What I don't like is its reliance by the use of unskilled individuals. Photogrammetry has always been a realm of surveying, and with the proliferation of drones, they think that the main consumer of the drone technology is construction, and so they think they fly something, they get data from their software that they purchased automatically, and it's going to be, you know, perfect. You know, oh well, we took out one more yard of this site than the drone said we should have. Yeah, whatever. But you still have to have procedures. Surveyors don't measure any more accurately. Well, they don't measure any more accurately than anyone who purchases our software and hardware. What we do is we gain precision, and so the only way to get the survey grade accuracies is to be precise. And drones are just like total stations, GPS, in the hands of the wrong people. Are not the wrong people. I want them to have it, but I just want them to understand its limitations. But what I'm really excited about, and have been for a few years, I don't really want to get into it until LiDAR drones are the more robust and part of the drone family. Because LiDAR, together with ground measurements from survey, I believe is better than a survey if you do it right. As far as natural ground, parking lot, of course, you're never going to have, you'll have reflectivity and everything, but you know, on a natural ground, you'll have so many points that the accurate or precision will be good with drones. But as far as photogrammetric drones, I love them. I look at the data, and for construction companies, they send me data so I can fix it. They do what I tell them to do, and it works out great. But there's that so easy a monkey could do it mentality that, you know, the salesman gives to them for the equipment. It's really got to be analyzed just like any other aerial survey in the past.
Thank you, Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
Great question. Thank you, Sami. Jerry, Trevor, anything else you guys like to add to the group? Or
well, I just
LiDAR drone. That's going to be amazing. Wow, that is news.
Well, they have them, but they're just so expensive and unsupported is my deal. And I mean, they have a lot of airplane drones, but
that's where I get most of my data from the city planometrics is all LiDAR. You know, the cities all rely on that. So if I could all of a sudden have my own LiDAR, wait a minute. It's like the internet. That's huge.
But you're also in an urban area, so you're like me.
Yeah, a lot of
I can't fly a 15-foot wingspan plane, which, you know, a LiDAR module and associated cameras are a lot of weight, so the helicopters are getting there.
Yeah.
But I would like to speak to question 13 about the election results.
Sure.
I just believe 2020 is a year of uncertainty. And that uncertainty is what has affected us the most. because the numbers and the math, which maybe I'm not right for always trusting, but I really do like when 1 + 1 = 2. All the indicators lead to believe that we should be doing great. But we have COVID, and we have elections. And that's the hour as a society, talking about the US, in case there's somebody, I'm sure there's somebody from somewhere else, but talking about the US. But our uncertainty, I believe, has the biggest impact on how we view the economy right now as being bad, because the indicators, jobless rates, that's a component that is bad in most areas, but it's not the economy. When we had the downturn in 2008 and the downturn in 2001, those were the financial markets themselves failing. The internet bubble was, lending and pricing stocks of companies that didn't exist. Those tech company going public that didn't have enough money or capital to actually be a company. Then the housing market was because of lending in the financial markets. But this time, it's the economy, the financial system is still there. What we have to worry about is rapid inflation or deflation from providing all this money from the government for stimulus and the low interest rates being held so long. But that's something we have to worry about possibly happening. But the economy, as it sits, I believe, has strong indicators to be strong on its own until that kind of stuff happens.
Sure. I appreciate that insight, Trevor. Thank you for sharing that with the group. And Sami, you're more than welcome to answer that question any way you see fit as well.
There's a question.
Garrett,
there is actually a question that came in from Bob. With employees working from home in the consulting business, particularly, which I do, does anyone think there'll be any revision to definitions of exempt or non-exempt employees? Bob, thanks for asking that question. I do fit in that category. Love to hear from any of you guys what you guys think.
There already has been in Washington, pretty much, unless you're an owner or actually hold a professional license, it's difficult to start classifying individuals as exempt. Under labor and industries, that's not the IRS, but still you get messed with in the state. It doesn't matter what you can put on your taxes, but exempt employees, pretty much everybody in my company is non-exempt. Hourly rate with overtime, all that stuff, because they're cracking down on it in Washington State. Probably because a large portion of people abuse the classification for years, and somebody complained. So
sure. Yeah. Thank you, Trevor. Thanks for the question. Does any other participant have any questions they'd like to ask? Feel free to put it in the chat box. And if not, we're about 10 minutes over our originally slated time, but we can certainly go back to the beginning of the conversation and talk about culinary desires in each of the respective cities we live in in the meantime. But if not, we can definitely, I think we can adjourn. But it looks like there's no one else asking any other questions. So Jerry, Trevor, Sami, with your permission, we can wrap this up right now. If you guys have any closing statements that you'd like to make to the audience, Jerry, I think I'd like to start with you first, and then we can close out. Okay.
I just want to thank everybody for their time, and know that hopefully we've got a vaccine coming and make everybody's life a little easier.
Sure. Jerry, looking forward to getting back to Austin and getting some good food, man. So, Sami?
Yeah, it was an excellent discussion, and I enjoyed being part of it and learning from some different perspectives. So I think the overall takeaway from me is optimism. So that's good. So I'll stop here.
Absolutely.
And thanks, Garrett, for hosting
Absolutely.
this. And thanks to Indovance.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. And then Trevor.
Same thing. I really appreciate the back and forth that I'm able to have here. As we said in the beginning, 4 corners of the country here. We all get stuck in our bubble, but it's nice to get out and see other perspectives that isn't portrayed on the media. So.
Sure. Absolutely. And thank you guys for your time today. And guys, also thank you to Indovance as well for making this happen. You guys are great partners to work with. You definitely make our lives easier. And for anyone listening today, this isn't a solicitation for business for them, but they are wonderful partners to work with, and they definitely make our lives easier. So to our partners and people that we work with in Pune in India, thank you for what you do for us, and truly appreciate you guys putting this on today. You guys have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Talk to you guys soon. Jerry, Trevor, Sami, I do hope to connect with you guys individually at some point. I'll be reaching out to you guys. Thank you so much for your time today. Talk to you guys soon. Have a great day. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.